Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our vBrownbag EMEA webinar this evening. Tonight, we're lucky to be joined by Mike Marseglia, I hope I got that right, who is a systems engineer from Providence, the one in Rhode Island, so the Eagle song says. And he's going to be talking about Auto Deploy and possibly Puppet and Razor. Now, I believe he had hopefully some labs he was going to go through, but apparently they're a little bit broken at the moment, so we're going to play it a bit by ear. But I will probably hand over to Mike and let him talk.
Great.
So,
Hey,
Mike, over to you.
great. Thank you. So I'm Mike Marseglia. You can reach me on Twitter at mmars. This is the first vBrownbag I've done. I am a leader, vMug leader for the Providence vMug as well, along with my counterpart Jim Peluso. We both work for Hasbro, which is the toy company. So you may have heard of us. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about Auto Deploy. As we alluded to earlier, I did have some labs. Unfortunately, I did not get them to work at the last minute, so I won't have anything live to show. But I hope to talk a little bit about, well, what is Auto Deploy. If you have questions or anything else, please feel free to speak up. I'd also like to know, just kind of how many people are using it, or if you're not using it, why aren't you using it? I like to use Auto Deploy even with a few hosts, because I think it really has a lot of value and save me a lot of time. Certainly, we'll go over that. So if you're not familiar with Auto Deploy already, as this picture illustrates, it's really all about just making something similar to clones of your ESXi servers. It's not quite cloning, but it's pretty close. It's more like image deployment, and you can have all of your servers created exactly the same, and then via the host profiles mechanism in vCenter, you can apply a standard configuration to all of those servers, and then that configuration can be audited for any kind of drift. So with Auto Deploy, you're not only able to install all the same patches and software components to each of ESXi hosts, but you can also then make sure that they're all configured exactly the same as well. So if you're using host profiles today, you can start. You're already halfway to Auto Deploy. So host profiles is probably the biggest bear when it comes to deploying Auto Deploy. So if we talk a little bit about just the three methods of Auto Deploy, when you start thinking about it and how you would want to implement it, you have a stateless method of Auto Deploy, where you're constantly deploying, or filling, in this case, filling up that glass to your ESX host. Every time it boots off the network, it's always going to grab an image from the Auto Deploy server. It's going to install ESX. It's going to boot. It's going to grab its config, and it's going to run. And that's every time the host reboots. You've also got stateless with caching. So you can boot from the network and then install ESX. You go through the whole same process, except then the image is saved to some sort of local media, whether that's a USB or flash or like SD card or regular hard drive, whatever you have local storage in that server, physical server. It'll saves a bit of that image there in the configuration, so that if it tries to reboot a second time, if that network boot is unavailable, it can fall back to that local image. And then you've got a stateful, where once the image is deployed to the server and it's configured, that's it. ESX is installed to some sort of local media on that physical server, and no matter how many times that server reboots, it's not going to boot from network again. It's always going to reboot from the local disk there. In each method, you may choose one over the other, I'm not sure why anyone would choose stateless at this point. It's really between the stateless with caching or the stateful method. But you have to think about which one you're going to choose. This is an important decision up front because if you're going to rely on that network infrastructure to boot your ESX host, you better make sure that that is pretty solid in that you've got some redundancy. And as we talk about the different components that go into an auto deploy infrastructure, we'll see what components, where the faults lie, and what kind of things we can do to kind of make sure that auto deploy is always working for us. Is there any questions about what auto deploy does or anything yet? I hope I haven't gone too fast yet, or does anyone have anything?
No, Mike. We haven't had any questions through specifically yet. I mean, I did launch a very quick poll. To be honest, it's the first time I've ever done that, but it was there, so I thought I'd try it. And
Sure.
the people are on. I think it seems that most people are considering using auto deploy, but don't seem to be using it yet. So hopefully that kind of
Okay.
helps you out a bit in terms
Great.
of the kind of
Sure. No,
what the
that helps
audience is
out.
looking for.
I hope I can sway you to use auto deploy. And when I'm done, I'll and get through auto deploy and kind of the mechanics and how it works. I'll go over a couple of use cases too, where we can maybe talk about some of those. So here's what's required. Okay, so you have your ESXi host. You have a vCenter server. You have an auto deploy component that can rely on a separate server, as pictured here on the diagram, or you can co-install. With the vCenter server appliance, you can enable the auto deploy feature on there as well. You need to have some sort of TFTP server, and you need to have a DHCP server. And the DHCP server, what happens is you're going to configure the ESXi host to boot to network. It's going to grab some information from the DHCP server. When you really dig into the mechanics, you're looking at PXE, and later on an iPXE boot. And if you don't understand or know the distinction, I'm going to get into that in a minute. The ESXi will boot, it asks for an IP address, it then asks for the next server and the boot file name so it knows what to do next. That next file is actually is going to be provided from auto deploy. When you install it, you'll go into vCenter and on the auto deploy tab, and it will tell you the DHCP options that you need to provide on your DHCP server, the boot file name and the next server. And that next file is actually an iPXE bootloader, and it's been hard coded to then talk to, and I think that's right, the auto deploy server to then pull down the rest of the ESX image. iPXE has a little bit more functionality than just PXE. So what's happening here is you have the basic PXE boot, which then loads an iPXE bootloader, which then chain loads the actual kernel and starts the whole installation process. This can be a little important to know, especially if you know a little bit about iPXE, because iPXE is very powerful. And with iPXE, you can create all sorts of different boot menus, and you can have your servers launch into doing firmware updates or have it boot ESXi or pretty much anything you want. So understanding how auto deploy is working at the boot process and knowing that that's just a little bit of iPXE code, you may be able to do something a little bit more sophisticated and be able to craft your own iPXE boot menu that will allow you to boot to auto deploy, or like I said, maybe it boots to, in my case, I was using HP servers. So you could do something where you boot to, say, the HP service pack for ProLiant and start an automatic firmware update. And you could create a little menu that would allow you to choose that. So that's what's happening there with that iPixie. And then once the iPixie loads, say it grabs that image and it starts installing ESX. And then once ESX boots, it actually registers with vCenter server, and that ESX server is going to show up during the auto deploy configuration, which you can do via Power CLI or the GUI for auto deploy, which is a fling. I'll have a link to the fling later, which is save you lots of time. You specify where you want this host to be inside of vCenter server, so you'll choose the cluster, and then once it loads, you'll need to maybe you'll need to create an answer file for the actual host profile, because there are some options in the host profile that the host actually needs to be booted for in order to have it working properly. But once you've done all of that, I mean, subsequent boots go relatively fast.
Mike, can I just ask a quick question about iPixie?
Sure.
Yep. I must admit, I've not used auto deploy much either. But I was wondering, you were mentioning there about booting in to do firmware updates, the driver updates or whatever for for your hosts. Is there any sort of easy way that perhaps you could automate that? So perhaps you could set a task to shut down your hosts overnight, reboot them. It goes into iPixie. It picks up the kind of the firmware updates, applies them, and then reboots back into ESX. All sort of during non-core business hours. Do you think there's any sort of easy way to do that with iPixie at all?
Yeah, I think you could. What you'd have to do, what I say is the iPixie. So if you remember, so what's happening here, and I want to back up and make sure I make a distinction that the iPixie bootloader that gets packaged as part of auto deploy is something that was packaged by VMware, and like I was saying before, it's hard coded to look towards auto deploy in vCenter in order to then load ESX next. You cannot pass any additional options, menu options, to that iPixie bootloader. It already knows what it's going to do next, and I didn't or couldn't find a way kind of around that. So if you wanted to do something like that, you would need to grab the latest iPixie code, and I think that there's a binary available for it, so you don't have to compile it, and then you would make that file available on your TFTP server. And then as far as automating something for, say, reboots at night, and then applying firmware updates and such, that would be twofold. So as long as your firmware updates, as long as you can automate that from a network boot perspective, you've got some kind of, whether it's a DVD image or something you can just pass some options to and say, here, go ahead and update the server automatically. You would just need to change the iPixie menu, or the iPixie instructions that it will read. So to automate that, you would have to have some sort of maybe probably not orchestration tool, but maybe something that I guess an orchestration tool, something that a job that you can schedule, that would replace that menu file for you, and then call the reboots and everything. I think maybe Orchestrator, there might be some functionality.
Yeah, you could probably do it in Orchestrator, so you can schedule workflows.
Right, or even maybe something like Jenkins. You know, Jenkins is more of a software development kind of tool, but it also has some capability to schedule jobs. And so if you have a Jenkins server, you might be able to do it within Jenkins as well. But understanding that it's iFixy, your options are really kind of limitless there, and how you can kind of extend and kind of hack away at auto deploy to get it to do other things, which is kind of neat. Yeah, pretty cool.
Cool, excellent. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Any other questions about this infrastructure? I said you should be familiar with DHCP. If you haven't configured a DHCP server before, just make sure that you read up on the appropriate options to stick in the DHCP server config. This is also another reason why you'll probably want to make sure that your ESXi hosts are on a separate network. You wouldn't want to have, say, another VM or another physical server kind of network booting, and then all of a sudden it's starting to receive an auto deploy image. So as you kind of think about this infrastructure here, you'll need to keep those things in mind, just to keep the ESXi hosts separate and what's actually going on inside of DHCP. And again, the infrastructure piece, we talked about the 3 different types of auto deploy states, where you can do the stateful, the stateless, or the stateless with caching. Here's where you'll want some redundancy. If you're doing a stateless without any kind of caching at all, and your network goes down, that's going to be a big problem, because it won't be able to retrieve the boot image. If you're doing stateless with caching, then your ESXi host may not be able to network boot, but as long as vCenter is available, it'll still have the local image, and it will still be able to boot with the last known image that it has that was cached, and it will still be able to join vCenter. With the stateful, obviously you won't have any of those problems, because it's just like pretty much installing ESXi right to the disk, and it won't call on the network anymore after that. So again, when I set this up, I had 2 DHCP servers, and they acted as failover for each other. So if one DHCP server was unavailable, I was guaranteed that at least the ESX host could boot from the other DHCP server. That might be something you may want to consider to make this infrastructure a little bit more fault tolerant. Optional, but highly suggested, would be a syslog server and a network core dump server, especially for stateless hosts. You're going to need something to capture and store those system logs. The logs would be lost if the host were to reboot, and say if you get the infamous purple screen of death. Or same thing with the core dumps. Those core dumps, when you get a PSOD, can be captured, but you need to have those components installed and running. Those components can be installed optionally with vCenter server, especially with the vCenter server appliance. There is a syslog server component with that. Be warned, with the syslog server component on the vCenter server appliance will just store those logs indefinitely, and you need to implement your own mechanism on the vCenter server appliance to rotate those out or age those out. Otherwise, you will fill the disk of your vCenter server appliance. So if you decide to turn on the syslog feature on the vCenter server appliance, just keep that in mind, that you'll have to manually do something about those syslogs later on. Or you can use any syslog server you have as well. Could be anything at all. Something on Linux, you could buy some kind of commercial product, you can send it to anything you have in-house. The network core dump server is a specific VMware product. You will have to install that. You could co-install that with vCenter server. You could spin that up on its own server by itself. It runs on a separate port. And in the event that something happens with the ESXi host, you'll at least have that core dump for some diagnostics to find out what's going wrong. I never actually ran into a problem where I had a core dump, so I got lucky in that regard. I haven't actually tested that feature, but the syslogging definitely comes in handy. And when you configure the host profile for your ESX host, you'll specify the syslog servers in that host profile along with the network core dump server. And I believe it actually it will kind of warn you when ESXi boots if you haven't specified these options and you've got a stateless install or stateless caching install. ESX will say, hey, I don't have any place to really put my logs, or I don't know what's going on here. So you will be warned of that afterwards. Any other questions on the infrastructure side of piece, all the other different pieces? Unfortunately, it's not just an auto deploy server. There's all these other kind of ancillary components that really go along with it. But you should have most of these, like a DHCP server or syslog server already. If not, I'll keep going. Okay. So you need to know DHCP. Have a good understanding of how to configure those subnets and put those options in, and if necessary, create a highly available kind of DHCP cluster consisting of 2 or more DHCP servers. Know how to work around host profiles, and there are some caveats in there, which I actually have some links to. But host profiles, when you create one for auto deploy, it's the same thing that you would normally do if you were to create a host profile today. You configure one server exactly the way you want it, and then you use that as a reference host, and you create your profile, and then you can change the options. With host profiles, the best advice I can give on that is to just change things one at a time and tread lightly. And because if anyone's tried it before, you know it's pretty easy to kind of make that host profile just unusable. And in vSphere in Power CLI, this is the point where it's going to have a live demo to show, but unfortunately I don't. And some tips. So when implementing auto deploy, use DHCP reservations to assign an IP address to a host. So grab the MAC. It's a little bit extra work. It's not as dynamic, but I do recommend it so that the host is always guaranteed the same IP. And you can do that through your DHCP server and just assign that reservation beforehand, before you network boot your host. Also, go ahead and create your DNS records before you provision the host as well. Make sure that DNS and DHCP are all set before you decide to boot a host with auto deploy, so that the fully qualified domain name will show up inside a vCenter server correctly. If you don't have DNS set up beforehand, you'll just see the IP address inside of vCenter server, and then that can be a bear to kind of change back. So if you like to see all DNS domain names in vCenter server, make sure those two things are set up first. I like to use the stateless caching. I don't particularly think there's anything wrong with it, even if something were to go wrong. The other possible failure point is the vCenter server itself in this case. But so if your vCenter server is down and your ESX host reboots, you're going to have a bad time. But the stateless caching really makes it a lot easier in case something does go wrong. So your ESX host can still boot even if vCenter is unavailable. Having that local image there on the ESX host as a backup, and it can be something as simple as USB storage. It doesn't have to be anything large or fancy. And the VMware Fling, the auto deploy GUI. If you haven't checked this out already, go to the Flings page, go look up the auto deploy GUI, and it will simplify your life dramatically. everyone loves PowerShell and PowerCLI. I love PowerCLI, but some of the commands to actually get the image working, um, you could script it, and maybe you can kind of create something that you can reuse. But the auto deploy GUI for first time or a novice really makes it easy just to get a handle on the workflow of auto deploy, where you have to create the image by loading in the either your software repositories, and then finding that VMware image that you're going to use for ESX, and you'll see all the bibs in there, and then you'll be able to take that just from one step at a time, from the image creation process all the way to creating your rules and assigning that image to a host, and putting that host, assigning that host to a cluster, and anything else that you would normally do in the Power CLI, you can do in the auto deploy GUI. It's best installed on whatever workstation you use for your day-to-day kind of vSphere management. It will create a repository under your local user profile in Windows to store a lot of the images that you create, so that you won't have to start from scratch every time you decide that you want to change something with auto deploy. You want to change something with the image, which is really handy. So you can have pretty much all of your settings and your images already there, and you don't have to retype all those commands all over again, or think back, oh, I had this really nice image, it had all of these updated VIBs in it, or I put some special device drivers in that image. The auto deploy GUI will kind of retain all of that for you without you having to do any of that. And then I've got some links at the bottom. Just read through the vSphere documentation. That's the best reference I can give on auto deploy. They have the boot process step by step as it goes through. I've kind of explained it already a little bit, but it's very clearly laid out. If you're using vCloud Network and Security, there's another KB on that, which will show you when you have special components that require VIBs to be installed into ESX, like VCNS, then those VIBs need to be incorporated into the image, and sometimes it's not always clear where to get those. VMware has created some KBs on where to find these specific VIBs for those products, that normally they will auto install those VIBs into the ESX iHost for you. But that if you were to do that after the host is already booted, those VIBs wouldn't be there the next time it rebooted, because it's not incorporated as part of the image. You need to take those VIBs out of whatever application holds them. It could be in, say, your antivirus application. If you're using an antivirus application that that takes advantage of some of the VCNS features, you'll need to grab those VIBs that vendor has specifically crafted, and pull them out and put them into the image, so that they'll be persistent every time the host reboots. It'll still have that. And some of the other VMware products as well have VIBs specifically for the ESX iHost that enable new functionality. Another good example is actually the HA daemon. So that I can't remember the name of the VIB. I know it begins with an F, but it's actually, the VIB comes installed with vCenter Server, and vCenter Server, when you add a host to a cluster and enable HA on that host, vCenter Server is installing the VIB on that ESXi host. So as part of setting up your base ESXi image, that's another VIB that you need to grab from vCenter Server and put into the base image, so that it'll always have it even if it reboots. That vib does not come with the free version of ESXi because it's a special feature. And then the last thing is the auto deploy fling, the link there, the auto deploy GUI, which has been a huge lifesaver for me. And it is updated for 5.5. So if you're using 5.5, they have a version out there for you. It does require some changes every time a new version of vSphere comes out. The auto deploy GUI needs to be updated as well. But that's really all I had. I'm free to talk some more about specific components. This really kind of the overview of auto deploy. I wish I had the lab working so that I could show specifically how the images get built, because I really can't explain that well enough without showing either the power CLI commands or the auto deploy GUI. It's kind of a hard concept to talk about. You really kind of have to see it. But if there's anything I can explain some more, or any other questions, let me know. If there's anything out there, I hope.
Thanks, Mike. In terms of, I suppose, managing the images that auto deploy pushes out, I suppose that there have to be, you're going to have to update that, obviously. Any time you get a new vib in, or a new version of vSphere, things like that. Is that quite a lengthy process to manage that? And does it mean that there's a certain size of environment that you kind of need to make auto deploy worthwhile, or would you say do it anyway?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that auto deploy the 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 way what auto deploy provides in conjunction with the host profiles in maintaining a consistent environment, and the benefits to that outweigh the time that's required to actually get this running. It may be a little cumbersome at first. If you're new to it, it's going to be a little bit rocky. You're going to go through some of these steps. You're going to be, oh my God, why am I doing this? I know I said the same thing myself. But when you have your DHCP config done, you're not going to be touching that again. When you do your updates on your ESX image, well, if you weren't doing that, if you weren't updating auto deploy images, you'd be managing software versions via update manager, right?
Yeah.
So either way, you've got to update the ESXi host. There's just a little bit more infrastructure work in getting auto deploy up and running, but the end benefit of knowing that you have a consistent environment because of what host profiles provides and the image repository that you can enforce, I think really does make it worthwhile. It's not as tedious as one thinks to create the image, especially again if you use the auto deploy fling. I had an environment that consisted of so I had a view environment. It's a good story, and this view environment had 2 vCenter servers, and each vCenter server was responsible for somewhere between 4 to 6 ESXi hosts.
Yeah.
And both environments were set up with auto deploy. Now, in this particular case, we were spinning down some servers out of the first environment and bringing that capacity over to the second environment. And having auto deploy really helped in migrating those servers over from one vCenter server to another. So not only 2 vCenter servers and maybe only 12 hosts, and having auto deploy was a huge time saver because everything happened without me having to do anything. All I had to do was switch the host's network over from network A to network B, so it would pick up the new DHCP config and it would just boot and grab the new image, and it would get assigned to the new vCenter server, and it would get assigned to the cluster I wanted, and it would get the configuration I wanted. And in this case, the networking config had changed a little bit as well, so it joined itself to the virtual distributed switch, and uh, correctly, and it was really very helpful just to kind of have that done. And I think at the same time, migrating between the two vCenter servers, the version of ESX was also updated. So that was a really good use case where it just made what could have been a tedious process just go much faster. With the Fling, and you can do this with Power CLI as well. If you create your base image and then you save it, you can reuse that. It's a lot more intuitive to do that inside of the Auto Deploy GUI. You'll see the base image you've created, and then you can clone that image off. So what you'll do is you'll create a copy of it, and that copy you'll be able to modify, and you'll be able to update the VIBs and add new ones to that image there. So for minor releases and minor updates, you'll want to do that. For a major update, I'm guessing if you're going from, say, 5.1 to 5.5, or even from 5.0 to 5.5, you may want to just build an entirely new auto deploy image and go from there. But because you can reuse them once you've got it built, it really doesn't take too long to just go and look for the newly updated VIBs and then just add, drop those into your image, add those in, and then you can apply it, and then you can test it on one server first. And a lot of the updates as well, you're going to have to reboot that server anyway. Say, well, some criticism I can imagine might be, well, in order to get this new image to work, I have to reboot my ESX server. Well, yeah, but for some of the updates, you're going to have to do that no matter what, especially if you want to make sure that some of those updates actually take. If the services need to be restarted on that host, say for SSL, if there was a bug in SSL that need to be fixed, those services are all going to have to be restarted anyway. So you're probably going to be looking at a host reboot for a lot of updates.
I suppose actually having different images gives you a very easy way to roll back if there's something that's a little bit broken in your new image, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a very good point that I overlooked as well. If you're updating drivers and the latest version of the driver had a problem, having those images there allows you to very easily roll back. Just simply change the auto deploy rules and reboot the host, and you've rolled back an entire revision. Makes it very, very, very easy to do that. I wish I'd gotten more into the Power CLI because I think maybe through scripting some of this, you could probably create a very controlled way of creating those images and keeping them up to date. It's still, I won't say it's kludgy, but it's I think managing the VIBs and the packages is, coming from a Linux background, I haven't found it as smooth, I think, as using a Linux package manager. I think sometimes it can be a little difficult to discern which packages have been updated and which ones I need to install in my new base image, because and that can be a little challenging. I wish that portion could be made a little bit easier, but it's not impossible to do. You can figure out by looking at the list and the version numbers, which packages need to be updated. But it's worked well, and like I said, I think the consistency kind of pays for itself. Any other questions? I mean, you can talk about how people might use it, or what you think about it, or if you've had any other obstacles. Um, trying to
I,
think of.
it's probably safe to say that a lot of people on here either haven't used it or are looking at using it. So they probably haven't hit any obstacles yet. But
Okay.
I suppose it's also worth pointing out. I don't know if you've actually gone through your VCAP exams at all, but certainly Auto Deploy is one of the kind of the blueprint areas on the VCAP DCA exam. So, even if you're not looking at rolling it out in your environment at work, it's certainly worth looking into from a certification perspective as well.
Oh, that's good to know.
It's yeah, it does actually form one of the blueprint items. So it's always handy to have an appreciation of it, certainly, and you can probably bet that the exam doesn't deal at all with with the deploy GUI at all.
No.
So it's very handy to know how to use the power CLI command. That's
Mhm.
I would
Oh,
say.
there is another caveat too with host profiles. I'd like to point out that I did not um, mention here. I wonder if I could Google for it, but there is another VMware KB that's actually pretty important. And you know what?
There's also a
It's so
licensing caveat, I suppose, as well.
yeah,
Uh,
there is, and it's so important. I think I might actually even go Google for it. So it's VMware KB and it's set P prof, prof host profile. Let's see. I think this is it here. Yeah, this is it. So this got me, uh, and it is still applicable to 5.5. So one thing you'll need to do in your host profile, otherwise you'll get these constant nagging compliance failures. It won't work good as a host profile if you're constantly seeing that your host is failing compliance. There's some, uh, and I don't quite understand this myself. I don't know why this is. I think it has to do with the way that the um, the storage is actually named. Each ESXi server kind of assigns a name to the storage, but you'll have to disable uh, some of these features in the host profile so that they're not carried over, so that when vCenter server looks at the host profile and then tries to determine compliance with the host, it's basically going to ignore all of these storage features. And because these items are unique per ESXi host, so you wouldn't want to be checking these for compliance. This is another, like I said, another thing that kind of bit me as I was getting into host profiles, and I was like, why is this happening? And it took a little bit of Googling, and I did find this one. But it's important, and so I wanted to make sure that I grabbed this. It's easy to find. I just did the quick and dirty Google for something. What I look for, I just looked
SAT P
for,
host
yeah,
profile. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, just the VMware KB on the set P profile, and you can see it's the first hit here. Um, and once you disable those options inside of the host profile itself, then the host will stop complaining, and they'll at least go green. So that's another good one to know.
I guess one of the other gotchas with auto deploy, as you mentioned with earlier on, one of the dependencies is vCenter. So
Mm-hmm.
presumably, obviously, your vCenter can't really be hosted on a cluster where you've got auto deploy configuring all of your hosts, since it provides since it's a dependency. So you'd
Yes.
presumably need a separate cluster, or a physical vCenter server, um,
Mm-hmm.
to get around that sort of cyclical dependency.
That's right. Yeah, that would be a good thing to have a management cluster. It's not um, I mean, it's not 100% required, but you could run into a scenario if the ESXi server that's hosting your vCenter goes down and reboots, vCenter won't be restarted in time on another ESXi server. So again, so you can go look at a management cluster, or you can look at vCenter server heartbeat, or some way to kind of make sure that the vCenter server is available for those hosts. And if you're using the caching feature, and so stateless caching or stateful install, it won't be as bad, but as just don't be running stateless. And there's you have to have some storage in order to do a stateless caching or stateful install. But you run into a lot of trouble if you're running stateless and your vCenter server goes unavailable at the same time your host reboots. I had that happen too. that was that wasn't a good day.
I can bet. Excellent. Right. Any other questions for Mike at all? Anyone got anything?
How about any obstacles? I mean, does anyone have any obstacles as to why they wouldn't use it? 'Cause I love it. I carry the banner of Auto Deploy wherever I go, and if there's any naysayers out there, let them speak and tell me why. And
well, I suppose something I touched on a few seconds ago was obviously the licensing, because the host profiles is Enterprise Plus licensing, or whatever the licensing levels are called nowadays. I keep forgetting, but it's the top tier of licensing. So obviously that kind of puts it out of reach of anybody not running on that licensing tier. So there would be, I suppose, a cost impact to doing it. That might put some organisations off investing in it, but from a technical point of view, personally, I can't think of any. It's I suppose you've obviously got to put some investment in terms of time and effort to set it up and to maintain it, but I wouldn't have said that would have been significant personally. But there you go. I don't know if anyone else got any sort of reasons they can think of why someone wouldn't do it. Anything that's stopping you using auto deploy? Stunned silence.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think I've got any more questions at the moment that I can think of. No. Anything else you got at all?
No, that's all I've got on auto deploy. I know there's some other stuff. I know that as far as automating ESX installs, there's been a lot of talk about Vagrant and using that, and there's lots of other options. But yeah, the auto deploy, I like it. It's best thing since sliced bread.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Been very illuminating, very useful. Hope you've enjoyed the experience as well, and we'd love to have you back at some point.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.